that's what I really love about the show, that it's not just this kung fu, Chuck Norris from the past, which was also in its own way so special and beautiful. That was done. This show is a complete reimagination, and the family aspect of the show and really the humanity aspect of the show is what makes it interesting to me, and representing all of the different cultures that they are representing and throwing it all in Austin, which kind of is a melting pot, really kind of just makes sense for where we are today. My name is Odette Annable, and I play Jerry Broussard on Walker.
The Brothers Walker.
Hey, Jerry.
Heard you were back.
Yeah.
How you been?
I'll tell you soon.
I would describe my cultural identity as Cuban American. My mother is first generation Cuban. She came to the United States when she was about 13 years old. And my father, he's European, but he was born in Colombia, raised in Nicaragua. And so I really have been raised in a total Hispanic household. But more than anything, I really identify with the Cuban culture, because that's, my mother's family is who I grew up with, not my father's family. So my father sort of has adapted to the Cuban culture as well. I think it was unique in a lot of ways. I am American, but I was raised in a very Cuban household. So we spoke Spanish, more often than we would speak English. I didn't learn how to speak English until I was about 5-6 years old. So, whether it was the food or, all of our gatherings, everything had, that Cuban influence. And so when I first started going to school, it was a little bit of a culture shock, and trying, I didn't learn who the Beatles were for a very long time. There was Gloria Estefan was playing in the background of my house. There was one album, and that's what I was raised with. So, trying to fit into whether it was junior high or high school, not so much elementary school, because you're not as aware, but I think I became more aware as to, how different my family was versus going to my friends' houses and seeing, what kind of food they ate and how they, lived their lives was vastly different than how I was being raised. So there was a little bit of, trying to fit in a box for me. The blonder I was, or, putting on the contact lenses or trying to fit in was something that I felt the need to do, and, not make a splash and not, be different, was what I thought was sort of necessary growing up. And I'm so happy to see that our culture is sort of shifting, because it really does matter. And I think our voices all need to be heard. And it doesn't matter what you look like. I'm Hispanic, I'm a Latin woman, but for most of my career, I have been labeled as white, just because I look a certain way. So there's been, it's been a little bit of a struggle to kind of, see where I fit and where I land.
I thought I cut ties, but it's harder than I thought. This family, it's not an easy thing to walk away from.
The first time I visited Cuba was when I was 10 years old. It was my mother's attempt to pack all of our suitcases as full as we could with things that they could, resell, and just to help our family in any kind of way. And I think that Cuba is kind of glorified as being just this absolute paradise, and it is, but the poverty there is remarkable. I remember being 10 years old and landing in Cuba, and my mom was, had me right next to her, very, very close to her, because, it was dangerous, and traveled about 8 hours in car to Santo Domingo. That's where my family is from. And it was, a third world country. People were showering with buckets, and people had very, very little, and it was completely eye-opening for me, where I was this American girl with a Game Boy in her hand, and I had all of the things. And, you know, I had kids lining up asking me what this device was, and I couldn't believe it. At 10 years old, I couldn't imagine that somebody wouldn't know what this very popular thing that every child should have was. And at the end of the trip, I remember giving all of my things away to my cousins and to the neighbors. And it was so amazing to see these people who had nothing really, and how happy they were. And, you know, what they made of life. And there wasn't, you know, all of these materialistic things that I was growing up with. And it was just such a beautiful thing for my family to show me, and I, you know, I'll never forget it. So I've been 3 times, and every time, and, you know, since we've been able to help my family, you know, every time there's a little bit more improvement in their homes. You know, they have showers now, but really, I think, you know, just recently, SOS Cuba, the hashtag SOS Cuba, and what's going on, I think people really need to understand that Cuban people aren't free. And what they really need is freedom. And I think that if we can highlight that and continue these conversations, I think that's the most important thing that we can do right now.
Is everyone this spirited right now?
No, they were all fine. It's actually kind of nice seeing everybody act like it's the end of the world, all the feels.